The Subaru Forester and Mazda CX-5 have similar ideals, but vary wildly when it comes to execution. So today, I'm going to try to help you and myself decide which one is better. If you enjoy fun, detailed car content without fluff, consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. To start things off, at the low end, these are priced very similar to one another, and they each come with standard all-wheel drive. So I would now consider both of them to be value propositions in a class that is quickly becoming very expensive. And when it comes to features, neither one has a huge leg up on the other. Both have standard LED projector headlights. On everything except for the base model, you'll have proximity unlock and lock. A power rear gate is also available on most trims, though with the CX-5, production shortages kind of limited that feature. But the Mazda makes up for that with things like standard automatic windshield wipers, something the Forester does not even offer. The base trim models also all have alloys, and a little rear spoiler there too, making it look a little less bare bones than a low-spec Forester. Though this has a more utilitarian approach to things, so it actually offers fog lights, a feature that is no longer available with the CX-5. It also has a minimum of 8.7 inches of ground clearance, about an inch more than what you'll get with the CX-5. And when it comes to your approach and departure angles, Mazda doesn't even give any official figures for the CX-5, though it definitely seems that the Forester has a better approach, and you'll get 9.2 inches of ground clearance, improved angles front and rear, mild all-terrain tires, a more aggressive final drive ratio, all in the wilderness spec. While the Mazda doesn't fall flat on its face off-road, from what I've seen, if you plan on regularly taking your small SUV over modest obstacles, this should be a more simple decision than choosing between chocolate cake or body damage. And if you prefer great customer service over a sandpaper water slide, may I recommend Royal South Mazda and Royal on the East Side in Bloomington, Indiana, the friendly, community-centric dealers that have let me test drive various Foresters and CX-5s to make this video possible. If you're in the market, check them out. When it comes to the cargo areas, the Forester is also the clear winner. It's very boxy. It seems to be roughly the same length on the inside as the CX-5, but also has a wider opening. Where the Mazda does a little bit better is in thoughtfulness. So it has a 40-20-40 split second row, and it comes with rear placed seat releases on all specs, something that you'll have to jump to at least the wilderness to get with the Forester. No matter which option you go with, you'll have rear doors that swing out wide like a big bird, but the CX-5 will be more compromised on space. While headroom is good, I think the seats are supportive enough, and you do have rear vents on all trims except for the base, legroom is toward the back of the class. My knees have to be kind of caressing the side of the seat in order for me to fit properly. But I'm 6'3", the Mazda should be okay unless you have a ginormous child seat, regularly lug around tall friends, or have needy backseat goblins. I also think that the middle seat of the Forester is more usable, and due to the larger windows, it feels less claustrophobic. Plus, you'll get rear USB ports back there as well. You'll also be able to recline the rear seat a little bit in all CX-5s and most Foresters, which may help the lounging capabilities here, but up front is where I see a true difference in luxury between the two. In here, we're going to have soft touch materials covering most easily visible points in the cabin. And if you step up in trims to something like the Premium that I tested in February, you'll have soft touch materials for where your knees rest. The design in here is clean. There's not too much going on. There's also an emphasis on analog control, so you don't have a touchscreen. It's actually all controlled through this dial right here, which is definitely divisive. Personally, I think the UI is oversimplified. Some things take too many steps to do. But while I'm driving, not having to pinpoint my finger, just control it where my hand naturally lies is nice. The only thing is these cup holders, which are deep. If you have big drinks with straws, you'll kind of be grazing them with your wrist. You also have kind of satisfying buttons and dials for all of your HVAC controls. And the analog gauges are incorporated nicely with either a large center display or with the lower trims, a smaller multifunction display. And just like the Forester, this does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it is not wireless. When it comes to comfort, I think with the CX-5, it really depends on who you are. I don't find these seats to be terrible, but I do wish I kind of had more thigh support and that they contoured my body at least somewhat on the bottom. Fortunately, only the base comes with cloth and no lumbar adjustment. My Select trim has a lever for the lumbar, heated front seats, and a leather suede-ish material. You will have full power adjustment in leather upholstery on the specs above this. So for me at 6'3", I could live with this. It's just not a high point of the interior like overall quality is. This has respectable panel fitment, feels sturdy, and looks upscale. When it comes to key features, you're gonna get a sunroof on the preferred trim, ventilated front seats, a head-up display, heated rear seats, and a heated steering wheel come on the Premium Plus onward. Those high specs may run you over 36 grand, but they also come with an excellent 10-speaker Bose audio system with rich sound and good power. In my opinion, it outshines the available Harman Kardon sound system in the Forester, and unlike the Subi, the base model still has tweeters with its 6 speakers and provides decent quality. But in the Forester, so long as you get a premium trim, you're gonna have a panoramic sunroof. You're also going to have more comfortable, but not exactly luxurious feeling seats, and a more airy, larger feeling cabin. But as I mentioned in the beginning, these do kind of have similar ideals, and one of those is analog control. You still do have plenty of buttons and dials to control your HVAC, your radio, heated seats, and in fact, you only get analog gauges. The infotainment system is much more traditional. It's also simple, easy to use, but certainly slow with a not so great resolution by today's standards. The fit and finish of the Mazda is also more impressive. There's just a little bit more gaps here, and it doesn't really look or feel as expensive, even though this car carries a sticker price of $7,000 more than that exact CX-5. You also can't get some of the high-end features that are available on the Mazda. Still, I think the premium trim with its heated front seats, 6 speakers, leather-wrapped wheel, and power-adjustable driver's seat with lumbar is a great option for the money. The Forester also comes with more storage, though the CX-5 can fit 40-ounce hydro flasks in the door panels. Despite both having a somewhat straightforward appeal, the materials and look are quite different. There's a lot more going on in the Forester's interior, but it does have more rugged materials and still some soft touch padding where your knees may rest, a little bit of stitching, and if you go with the sport trim, it would be a lot more orange accenting. So it's not too boring. It just doesn't push the boundaries in any way other than that sunroof. And the touring trim's facial recognition system, which may be a little unnerving to some of you, but it not only detects if you're falling asleep or not paying attention, it can store like 3 different faces and then works like an iPhone. It knows who's in the car and can adjust the exterior mirrors and seats to your preferences. On the road, these two are entirely different, but share a common goal of confidence. Under the hood of most CX-5s, you're going to find a naturally aspirated 2.5 liter direct injected engine. Of course, this is a 4-cylinder and it will definitely whine its way up a long hill, but it does have adequate power. We're talking 187 ponies. So while I can't call it relaxed, unless you're at super high elevation or you actually want something that is remotely quick, I think you'll find this engine to be good enough. And if you don't, you can also get a turbocharged version of this, which has what Mazda calls a dynamic pressure turbo. So to keep it as simple as possible, you have a little valve in the turbo that can direct a higher pressure that spins up the turbo quickly at low RPMs, resulting in extremely good response for forced induction. It also makes 310 pound-feet of torque on regular gas. You can actually put in premium and get more torque and more power. 0 to 60 with that engine is going to come up around 6, maybe low 6-second mark. Here, it's going to be considerably slower. But here's what I got last February. Just very slight amount of wheel spin. Really smooth shifts, but quite slow. Either way you go, power is going to be routed through a 6-speed automatic transmission. With the naturally aspirated setup, it is definitely less refined. Sometimes it's not entirely sure of which gear it wants to go in, and if you're at low speeds, it may throw you into first somewhat aggressively, but a vast majority of the time, it just kind of works in the background. I just think with the turbocharged engine, the added torque means that the car really doesn't need to downshift in order for you to take off in time. Kicks down okay. Pulling up to 65 miles per hour, we're a little bit above 2,000 RPMs, probably about 2,200. The engine is sitting there in the background, just a little bit, a touch of wind noise, but it's not really that loud. Now, the thing that impresses most people, including myself, about the CX-5 is just how well it handles. And let me explain why. So, first and foremost, we have a composed suspension. Yes, it's going to have a little bit of body roll, but it feels very planted and sure of itself. Plus, you have the best steering in the class. It's a little bit lighter than what I think I found with the CX-50 and CX-30, but in turn maybe feels a touch more playful. And there's actual feedback coming through it. I kind of have a good idea of what's going on. On top of that, there's like no play on center. It's tight. Yet, the steering ratio isn't like super quick, so it doesn't feel too darty. That also means that it's direct, and really the whole thing as a package is predictable. Like, yeah, I feel like I know exactly where the car is going. While it seems like the CX-5 prioritizes handling above ultimate comfort, it doesn't fall apart here on a really tattered road. We're still going to have independent rear suspension on every single model. While it is kind of easy for me to detect the individual breaks in the pavement here in the CX-5, nothing has come off jarring. It's just not quite as relaxed and luxurious as you may want. But me personally, I think it's still smooth enough to keep me happy. Higher trim models will also have an off-road mode because, again, this has standard all-wheel drive, and it's not full-time. It's supposed to react to how you're driving it. So if I'm taking off hard from a launch or something, it tries to send power back there immediately if it senses wheel spin, or if, again, you have it in that off-road mode, which is unfortunately delegated to the premium trim. It does a great job at using the brakes to redirect power side to side and should help this be as capable as its angles will allow it to be. Subaru also uses a brake vectoring off-road setting that is dubbed X mode. Another thing that I really like about the CX-5 is its driving position and visibility. You have relatively low front windows, but a windshield that feels very close to me. The seat kind of feels far away from the floor, so you really do feel like you're sitting in an SUV, but you don't feel like you're sitting on top of it, which is the experience I gather from the Subaru Forester. So the pro to this is that I have a very objective perception of my surroundings. The only similarity between these two powertrain-wise is that there is a 2.5 liter sitting underneath the hood of the Forester. Here, it is a boxer engine, so it's flat, which lowers the center of gravity a little. This makes slightly less numbers at 182 horsepower and 176 pound-feet of torque. It's also longitudinally mounted like a traditional rear-wheel drive-based car. And that leads me to Subaru's calling card, which is full-time all-wheel drive. And it can send well over 50% of torque to the rear wheels, but tends to hover around a 60-40 split front-rear. Of course, since this is an automatic Subaru, it is going to have a continuously variable transmission. And this has been refined over the years, where when we're comparing naturally aspirated to naturally aspirated, I'd say the Forester has a smoother powertrain than the CX-5. And really, there's just two downsides to this CVT as I see it. And yes, I will talk about reliability here soon. But the first thing is its takeoff abilities. It's just not going to leave the line very quick. But I think overall, the way that this picks up speed is good enough for the class. I just wish that they offered a turbo option like the Mazda CX-5 and the Subaru Outback for people that live in higher elevations or just want a relaxed powertrain. It will try to fake shift here and there to keep it from sounding like a dirt devil. When it comes to flat out numbers, the Forester is about the same, maybe a little bit slower than the CX-5. The next downside with the CVT is that it tends to get a little groany, but the pro to this is that response is great for the class. Getting up to highway speeds is not difficult here in the Forester. In fact, I think due to the transmission just eagerly changing the ratio, it may feel a little bit more peppy in everyday scenarios than the CX-5. And at 65 miles per hour, it's going to rev a little below 2,000 RPMs. However, I will say that there's maybe a little bit more wind and tire noise than what I found with the CX-5. But if you're driving a lot on the highway or wherever, you're probably going to appreciate the slightly better gas mileage that you're going to get from the Forester. Now this one does have auto stop start, something that a lot of people don't like, but you can deactivate it through a button here. The Mazda does not have auto stop start, but with the naturally aspirated engine, you will have cylinder deactivation. Taking this on the same road as the CX-5, it's a pretty substantial difference between the two. The smaller imperfections are heard, but not felt. And the bigger stuff just barely phases this thing. If a majority of the roads around you look like this, then I think you're going to enjoy the Forester a lot more, even if, yeah, it's not as fun to drive. It's a lot better, guys, it's a lot better. Now around corners here with the Forester, the first thing you're going to notice is that the steering is also quick. This thing reacts to your movements with a low level of latency for this class. But it's nowhere near as engaging for a couple of reasons. One, the on-center feel is just kind of vague. I mean, it does change direction, it just almost has a kind of disconnected feel there. And it's also just kind of numb overall, and I think that the way the Mazda steering builds up in weight just makes it feel all the more natural. One area where the Forester doesn't give up any ground is going to be in the suspension side of things. For a small SUV, body roll is kept under control pretty well, and it does this without really sacrificing much of anything in comfort. And when it comes to reliability, I think the CX-5 has overall a better track record, especially considering the Forester's issues pre-2018. This generation of linear-tronic CVT has been much more dependable than it was in the past. Subaru has also addressed prior oil consumption and head gasket issues, though the latter is something that boxer engines will be more susceptible to in the long run. This generation's most common complaints come from glitchy infotainment, batteries draining, and windshields cracking. The CX-5's 2.5-liter and 6-speed automatic are super durable, but select cars around 2018 did have a major head leak. Cheap stock brakes, paint chipping, and a fuel pump recall also resulted in some complaints. The 2.5 turbo has been a great engine outside of an oil consumption issue in 2021 related to bad valve stem seals. I'd recommend both if you prioritize reliability, but Subaru's old problems still leave me a little more confident in recommending a CX-5 for the person who wants to drive it until Grand Theft Auto 6 actually comes out. Safety-wise, the Mazda CX-5 was one of the only vehicles in its class to not fail the new updated testing by the IIHS. But the Subaru's Active EyeSight suite has less complaints by owners than Mazda's tech, and while both of them come standard with adaptive cruise control, the Forester base comes with lane centering, whereas you have to jump to the signature trim to get true lane centering with the CX-5, and that stops working at 40 miles per hour. All CX-5s do have a lane keep assist though. Unlike the Subi, the CX-5 does come with blind spot monitoring as standard. Despite their very different appeals, these are similar in premise. The CX-5 and the Forester are both Japanese-built, reliable, competent handling SUVs with a straightforward approach to the interior and mechanical bits. Both even come standard with all-wheel drive. They have the same basic morals, but disagree strongly when it comes to personality. The CX-5 is much more engaging to drive and comes with a more expensive cabin theme, some thoughtful touches, and enough comfort and space. Plus, turbo availability is a must-have for some. But quite frankly, after driving them back-to-back, the Forester does more. Disregarding steering weight and communication, it handles as well as the CX-5, but is superbly forgiving in comparison. While not as unique, it also provides a simple interior with soft touch rest points. However, it comes with more agreeable seats, much more rear legroom, and a larger cargo space. Wrap that up with better gas mileage and off-road credentials for a real car enthusiast dilemma. The CX-5 is still my personal choice, as its character aligns almost perfectly with my values if I were to actually buy a crossover. It has SUV attributes with the disposition of a premium hot hatch. I want to call it the winner, however the Forester is not only a jack of all trades, it's a master of some. For that, the highly versatile and capable Forester will edge out the more charismatic CX-5 as my broad recommendation between the two. But let me know which one you would pick. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like to help me embarrass the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the bell for more. And follow me on Patreon for additional content. I'll catch you in the next one. So outside of engine noise, oh, there's it goes. Those aren't goats. Oh no, those aren't goats. I'm f***ing stupid.